Hello and welcome to the Lift Up Journeys podcast. My name is Katie and I am one of the founding members of Lift Up Women in Life Sciences, a community created to connect, champion and inspire women from academia through to C-suite across the life sciences industry. I'm looking forward to sharing with you an inspiring collection of career stories from a group of wonderful women who work in leadership positions across the life sciences industry. I hope by listening to these stories, you will feel inspired in your own career and gain the skills, confidence, and knowledge you need to climb the career ladder and break through the glass ceiling. Welcome back to another episode of Lift Up Journeys podcast. Today I'm joined by the wonderful Linda, and Linda has quite an introduction for us. She has over 40 years experience in the biopharma industry. Interestingly, 30 years of which have been spent in regulatory strategy, intelligence and policy roles. She's now business operations and integration lead for the newly formed Pfizer Oncology R&T for the global regulatory strategy team. She was previously executive director, chief of staff, head of regulatory centers of excellence at Seagen, and has held various senior regulatory positions at Sanofi, Bayer, and GSK. She holds bachelor's degrees in microbiology and English, I believe, from Rutgers University, and an MS in drug regulatory affairs from Arnold and Marie Schwartz College of Pharmacy, where she was inducted into the Roche Society. She has attained various regulatory affairs certifications, awards, and honours along the way, and is a past two-term member of the RAPS Board of Directors. Her work doesn't just stop with RAPS. She's also been chair of the DIA Regulatory Affairs Community and founder of the DIA Regulatory Intelligence Working Group. She's currently co-chair of the RAPS 2024 Regulatory Intelligence Conference too. But most of all, she's the most proud of her role as an educator and a mentor to those entering the regulatory affairs profession. So I'm super excited to be joined by Linda today. It's great to have you here with us, Linda.
And I'm super excited to be here and hopefully share my career journeys with those that are
Absolutely.
listening.
And we're so pleased to have you on board. I think your journey through regulatory affairs in itself as a profession is super exciting. I would love to start at the very, very beginning of your career journey, Linda. So, would be great if you could maybe tell us a little bit about what you were like when you were younger, what you were studying at school, and what was the sort of passion and interests for you back then.
Well, and it's strange. I looked back at my junior high yearbook. So junior high here is till about grade 8 in the United States. And shockingly, in that yearbook, it said I wanted to be a dentist. Now, I don't recall this at all, ever wanting to be a dentist. I love my dentist, but I don't remember having that as a career aspiration. But obviously, somewhere in my life, I wanted to do that. When I got to high school, I really enjoyed the sciences. So, you have more advanced sciences in the high school, which is grades 9 to 12 here in the US. So I really wanted to focus on science, but I also loved English. But my parents reminded me that having a degree in English may not get me a job. So, that I may want to focus on something that was a little bit more in alignment with potential for jobs that I also love, though. But they also made that very clear. Make sure you really love what you do. I started in pharmacy at Rutgers Pharmacy School, realized I was going to have to be there for 5 years. At the time, it was a 5-year program, and I thought, I don't really know if I want to do this for 5 years. I think 4 years is better. Big mistake on my part, by the way, and I will own up to that one. But Rutgers had multiple different colleges. They still do. And so I transferred from the pharmacy school into Rutgers College at the time, which is part of Rutgers University. And I followed my journey into microbiology, which was fascinating to me. So I wanted to work in science. I just wasn't sure where or how. I also should explain that I grew up across the river from J&J's world headquarters. So I grew up in a very small town in New Jersey. And right across the water was this huge, edifice that my father would point out every time we passed it. Someday you can work there. So it was, I had that in my head and Bristol Myers Squibb at the time was just called Squibb, was also very close by, that there were opportunities for me and they were pretty close. So I think my parents and my father in particular helped shape that
Yeah,
journey a bit.
it's really interesting, isn't it, when you always dig back into your history in school and academia, and you realize actually how much of that was weighted by your family members and how they really tried to push you. But I love the fact you touched on do something that you're really happy doing. I think that's incredible. Incredible advice to share to anybody, and it's great that you were able to follow that and you combined it with English, didn't you, when you were studying? So you still got the chance to do the
I
English.
did. I did. So I said, to my parents, if I can graduate in 4 years with a degree, can I get a double degree, a double major? At the time, again, it's very different than it is now. I won't tell, well, if I've been working 40 years, you can imagine when I went to university. But we had the opportunity to have a double major. So they said, if you can get the work done and you can graduate, feel free. At the time, you paid per semester, not
True.
per credit.
Yeah,
I should add that. So that was a little bit more enticing as well, that I was able to do this on a semester basis, not per credit. So,
fantastic. And talk us through how you first stumbled into the life sciences industry then. Talk us through that move from graduation through into the industry.
all right. So you have to remember, when I entered industry, we didn't have the internet to look for jobs. We looked for jobs the old fashioned way. Actually, we get papers
Yep.
on Sunday. And on Sunday, we would go through the help wanted section. We didn't have networks like we do now. There wasn't LinkedIn. There wasn't other. There were professional associations. I probably didn't know
Of
what
course
they
not.
were, or
Yeah.
where they were, because there was no internet, unless you knew someone that was part of it. So, I did graduate with this degree in microbiology, and even as a nerdy science person at the time, there was I think it was called the Theobald Smith Society, which was part of the American Society for Microbiology. So they did have meetings, and they would post things in school that they were having these meetings. So I did start to network at a very young age with a bunch of scientists who helped me kind of understand what I could be doing when I graduated. Back then we didn't have the career counselors like we do now. You kind of were left on your own to figure it out. My father was always willing to try to help connect me with somebody, and I didn't want that. I probably should have listened to him, but I wanted to do it on
Yep.
my own. So I kind of started going to these Theobald Smith Society meetings. So I thought, well, people must need microbiologists in industry. They must need them in life science. There's life science companies all over the place in central New Jersey. So let me start going. And that is kind of how I found my first job. I was connected with someone who was looking. So they would often post job opportunities at these meetings, which was another
Perfect.
reason to go. So it was a small generics company. So my very first job was as a QC microbiologist for a small generics company in 1983. That company, I mean, generic companies were bought and sold back then. This was before the 1984 Patent Term Restoration Act, so before generics were
Yeah.
really a thing. Um, that was a role I did for a couple of years. And, I started to think, maybe the laboratory isn't a great place for me. I'm very
Yep.
social. And being in a laboratory is not really a social scene, especially a small laboratory, because it's you and a couple of other people, maybe. Um, so then I had the opportunity, once you get into a role like that, you start to hear about other roles that are open. And, again, reading the Sunday paper and help wanted, there was a company about 7 miles from my home. This job that I had was about
Oh,
35
wow.
miles from my home. There was a job much closer to my home, paying much better, doing the same thing, but for a company that had both consumer healthcare and prescription products. I thought, well, this is more of the journey I want to be on. I didn't even know what a
No,
generic
of
was, by the
course.
way, when
Yeah,
I
yeah.
started there. So once I got there, then I realized what a generic was. And I said, I don't know if I really want my career to focus on this. There's nothing wrong with that group. That was not what I wanted to do. Um, so I moved to this slightly larger company as a QC microbiologist, more money, didn't have to travel as far. But I also knew that that company had many more opportunities at the world headquarters, which at the time was in Jersey
Oh,
City, New
okay.
Jersey, kind of far from me, but still I knew that there were opportunities. So going there, I wasn't pretend it wasn't. There was a potential for me to do something other than a QC microbiologist. So after about 3 years there, and I will say that I learned a lot of things there. Every time I was given an opportunity to learn something, how to do line inspections, go down on the manufacturing floor because it was a manufacturing facility. Go down and help somebody do a line inspection, a QA functions. Help people write SOPs. I said, you know what? I should learn more. I have the opportunity to learn more. So that's one thing I'd love to impart on this audience is that if you have the opportunities to learn more, please take that. Please take that as a sign. And I'll tell you why this helped me going forward. So this company that I'm talking about, I want to say that I stayed there for 19
Wow,
years.
that's amazing.
So we'll start with that. It is amazing. I think that doesn't
No.
happen a lot these days. But I stayed there. I stayed there for 16 years until we were acquired, and I'll get into that. But from the QC microbiology, I was asked if I'd like to move into quality assurance. So moving up a little bit, going to the world headquarters, writing
Mhm.
SOPs. I did that for a year or two. It meant going to manufacturing floors, watching products being made, writing procedures. So it was a little bit of everything. And that was great as well. I also wrote the micro procedures for the lab. So I got to do things that used uh, things that I had already learned. So I'm starting to repurpose skills already, and only a second job that I have. My company said, you're doing so well. We'd love to offer you a GMP role. So in quality, but as a
Oh,
GMP
wow.
auditor, GMP trainer. And I said, well, what does that mean? They said, you get to travel a lot. And that's like my eyes like, wee, because I love to travel. I am a wanderer at heart. So I think that's all I heard was you get to travel a
Yep.
lot. And I
Yep.
was like, sign me up. So again, not applying for a job, but saying, hey, we have space. Would you like to do this? So moving again within that company to a GMP role. And I stayed there for a few
Wow.
years. That's when it gets interesting. I would eat lunch with people that were in
Oh.
regulatory. And I would poke at them, like, what do you do? Why do you do it?
What
How
is
do you do it?
regulatory? Yep.
You know, what is regulatory? Back then we were all generalists, so they did everything. It wasn't like it is now where we have, somebody doing ad promo, someone doing labeling.
Yeah.
We did everything, which is a great way to learn. Also kind of
Yep.
throw you in the fire. So one of the people that was at this table said to me, I'm attending a master's degree program in regulatory. We were in Jersey City. This was close. It was in Brooklyn,
Yeah.
Long
Yeah.
Island University, Arnold Marie Schwartz College of Pharmacy. Would you like to commute with me? The company's going to pay for your education. I said, oh, well, sure, sign me up. So I started taking classes with her in 1992. She had already started maybe a year before me. And we would commute with 4 people total into Brooklyn twice a week and go to school. It was one of the only programs at the time. I think the only other program was the Temple program. Um, but after a year, she resigned from the company. And she told her boss before she left that I would be an amazing replacement for her, that she had heard my presentations and things at school and my research, and I would be a great person to
Wow.
replace her. So her boss asked me if I was interested. I said yes. He hired me. So I'll give a shout out to Gene Lyons, who left Block Drug Company, and Pat DeMaio, who hired me for kickstarting my regulatory career, because they were the ones that, it's karma. It was I was the right place at the right time. The best move I've ever made, and been happy ever
Amazing.
since.
And it sounds like a lot of that is down to your own personal mindset as well, being open to trying new things and almost just wanting to continue learning. That must have been a very big factor for you.
It is a huge factor. You know, I think we're all adult learners. I think we have no choice these days. But I think about how the regulatory environment has evolved since
Yeah.
1992, or even since I started in the biopharma industry, and the changes. I talked about this recently. I did a kind of a workshop at the RAPS Convergence last year, and it was about the future of the regulatory profession. And I started to reflect on how I started, and we didn't even have monoclonal antibodies
True.
on the market. We didn't have antibody drug conjugates. We definitely didn't have
No.
gene therapy, CRISPR or CAR T therapies, excuse me. we didn't have any of those things. How much science has evolved, how much the regulatory, the diseases that we can now handle. It's what an amazing journey when I look back. It was paper bound.
True.
We were paper bound industry until the late 1890s. Everything was
Yeah.
paper. We got things in paper. We had fax machines. We didn't have the internet. There was no internet. There was no email. We did things in a very different way. Keeping up to date on what was going on outside, even within the US, we'd have to call the FDA and ask them if there was a
Yeah.
guidance. There was no list of guidances. You couldn't click on something and download it. It was a very, very
Yeah.
different time. And as I said, as a generalist, you really do everything. You even type the submissions. You
Yeah.
you do everything. Um, it makes you learn a lot, which is a fantastic way to learn. That company, Block, is called Block Company. Was my first company. Was purchased by GlaxoSmithKline.
Oh, wow.
So I stayed for 3 years to do their
Oh,
integration.
okay.
So I stayed to do the integration, to move all of our, re-register our products and things. So and at the end of that, I decided to, it was a good time for me to look for another role. It was kind of kicking the pants
Yeah.
I needed, really, to start looking for
Yeah.
something different. So, but that was my role at that company. They saw what I could do. So for those that are listening, not all of us in regulatory start in regulatory. It happens
Yeah.
very rarely. Many of us come from the laboratory. Many of us come from quality assurance. People come from clinical development, they come from commercial, they come from toxicology, they come from all walks of life. My thing is that everything that I did, I learned something, and I repurpose those skills to this day that I learned
Yeah.
40 years ago. So I've been asked, that was a real waste of time, those 10 years. Absolutely not. Those 10 years in quality helped shape my life going forward. So nothing was ever a waste of
Not
time in
at
my
all, not
book.
at all. And I completely
No.
agree with you. I mean, I speak with a lot of regulatory professionals. I know a lot of amazing people who are now sitting in leadership positions in that industry. And I think nearly every single regulatory leader I've spoken to has come from a different part of the industry before. And I think it gives such an opportunity for people to become the next step in their career and to develop those skills. I'm curious to hear from you, Linda. What do you think it was about
Mhm.
regulatory that's kept you in that profession for so many years?
You get much closer to the
Yeah.
patient. Now, granted, I'm not working as a CRO, I'm not working in a clinical site, but you can get much closer to the patient, which is something I wanted. I wanted to, my mother once, somebody asked my mother, "What does your daughter do?" And my mother said something about she gets products to patients faster, because that's what she
Yeah.
thought I did. That was her distilling what I was doing at the time, that it was very patient focused. And all of us have stories about parents or loved ones that have siblings that have become ill, and the drugs that have saved them. So we all have those personal stories, and a lot of that personal stories for me, like my grandmother dying of diabetes, my parents both dying from cancer. A lot of those things hit home. A lot of those kind of drive you what you want to do. But regulatory affairs, it's also it's a role where you have to interface with so many different parts of the organization. You have no choice. You touch everything from, coming out of a preclinical into the clinical. You get to look at protocols. You get to look at investigator brochures. You get to weigh in on clinical trial design. And then, once a product is in, you get to meet with the health authorities and talk about your product. And then you get to, do post marketing. There's so many different things you can do within regulatory now. There's such if you're really good, for instance, if you're really good in the commercial end, you may want to go to
Yeah.
advertising and promotion. If you're really good at minutia, you may like to go to labeling. Um, when I say labeling, I don't mean the label on the outside of a product. I mean the labeling that
Yeah.
goes inside the product. If you're good strategic thinking, you may want to go to a strategy or regulatory science role where you're kind of the conductor of the entire team. You run the regulatory team meetings. You are the person that represents the product or the project at a higher level product team meeting. A lot of people aspire to get there. Most of those people come from a clinical background. Um, but there's many, many different opportunities. Regulatory
Yeah.
operations, which is it's document management and regulatory information management. Where I've been for the last 16, 17 years off and on has been the intelligence and policy space, which I think you need to have a regulatory background in order to get into that. But to me, I got into this role, I think I was 45 maybe when I moved into it, 45, 46. And I said, oh my Lord, I have found the regulatory place I want
Oh,
to
that's
be.
lovely. That's great to hear.
So it is great to hear. And I still do it. And I have to tell you, it's been a fascinating ride. It continues to grow. Still involved in it in a tangential way, but it's being able to shape the regulatory environment is a fantastic way to end your
Yeah.
career. I'll say that.
It's almost a full circle moment, isn't it? To know that you can
It is.
now, with all of your experience, have an influence on a regulatory environment. I think that's almost a full circle moment for you. One thing I really wanted to touch on for
It
you as well,
is.
Linda, obviously you worked your way up into different leadership levels as well. Tell us a little bit more about the first leadership position you had, why you've kind of gravitated towards leading people.
The first leadership role I had was not in the
Wow.
industry. So people will say to me, well, it says on here that I have to have management experience or leadership experience. I said, well, do you run any external groups? Are you a Girl Scout leader? Are you a Boy Scout leader? Do you do something externally where you lead a group? And many times they'll say, oh yeah, I lead this, a food bank initiative in my group. I said, well, you're leading a group. You do understand that. So sometimes I have to tease
Yeah.
things out of people. But the first time I actually ran a group in the life sciences was when I was working at that second company, Block Drug Company, in regulatory affairs. I worked in international regulatory affairs, which meant we were responsible for everything
Yeah.
but the US. So quite a huge, quite huge. And I was responsible for Canada, Latin America, Southeast Asia, and Eastern Europe. This is before the EU. I should say
Yeah.
that. It's a long
Yeah.
time ago. But it was when the EU was being formed and EMA was being formed. So I got to hire people. And that company didn't necessarily have like a lot of soft skills training. It was a lot of seat in
Yeah.
the pants training or having somebody hold your hand kind of training. The bigger companies that I have worked at have had proper soft skills training. So it's been a little different, but that was there, seat in my pants training. But I had done a lot of things externally, leading teams and things. So I think I was able to use some of that in that like I'll call it my
Yeah.
first big job, which was
Yeah.
Block Drug.
And what
Yeah,
have you enjoyed over the years about leading people?
you know, I haven't really thought much about it, but I love seeing people
Yeah.
grow under me. It's I love seeing their professional development. My favorite part of somebody working for me is when they want to leave and go somewhere else within the company because they want to grow. And I can say yes to that, although it's going to kill me because I'm running that group and I'm going to be down a person. But seeing people grow like that, it's not that I want them to leave ever, but I have let so many people kind of go off on their own within the same company. None of them were leaving to go somewhere else. Almost always they were staying within the company, just wanted to learn and do something else and grow their profession. And to me that was so
Yeah.
fulfilling to see that. It's like having children, having your child really do well in college and then get a great, do something great in their career. It's that same kind of
Yeah.
feeling.
It
So
must be really rewarding to be able to see someone develop over a period of time to the point where they want to then push themselves out of the comfort zone and go into something else. Like you said, it's like almost seeing a child grow up, isn't it?
and it's great because with LinkedIn, we have the opportunity to see where people are going. And I see people that I hired as regulatory associates or managers are now executive directors and VPs at companies. And I said, you know what? I think and I hope that I imparted something on them and I helped
Yeah.
them in their journey. And
Yeah.
we still keep in touch. I don't think there's one person I ever hired that I haven't
Oh,
kept in
that's
touch with.
lovely.
So that's also good. That meant I think that meant I was a good manager, and they still wanted to
Yeah.
talk to me. So
And
that was
also
good.
not just being a good manager, but clearly a good mentor as well. Tell us a little bit about the work you've done from a mentoring perspective. I know it's something really important to you.
It is, and it maybe goes hand in hand with teaching, but they don't exactly connect with each other. But I started mentoring for the very first time maybe about
Oh, wow.
2010. And I was part of the DIA working groups for the regulatory affairs working group at the time. I wasn't chair at that point, almost, but I was still in the Reg Intel working group. And DIA had a group called, I think it was called Emerging Professionals. And they decided that they would like to have a mentor program where a mentee could pick a mentor that was active in one of their communities. At the time, I think they were called SciEx. So I said, yeah, I'm game. So somebody approached me. We were the first match. His name is Joao Duarte. Joao, at the time, was an intern at the EMA, and he said, I really am interested in Reg Intel. I'd love to know what you do. So we connected. He was a great mentee because he put his schedule together. He put together what he wanted to talk about. So he was great to start with because he kind of set the bar for the rest of the folks that I work with. And I mentor some people for years, some people for a very short period of time. It depends what they need. Some of it is coaching, some of it is mentorship. But we started talking. Now, Joao is still a dear friend of mine. Joao has moved up in regulatory intelligence roles from company to company to company. He's now chief of staff at Alexion. So he's done very well for himself. We still talk all the time. And I see that, and it makes
Yeah.
me really proud because he was the first person I mentored. And he followed what I was doing because I was so passionate about what I was doing. He said he could hear it in my voice and he wanted to try it. So he spent quite a bit of time in intelligence and policy roles. So, and we still do workshops together.
Wow.
So I guess he still likes me because he's still going to do a workshop with me. So thank you, Shamor Duarte, for being my very first
Yeah.
mentor.
And it's
He was
obviously
great.
led
He
you
was
on to
absolutely.
helping so many more as well. I love the fact you said he turned up prepared, had an agenda. I think that's very important, isn't it, to know what you can get out of a mentoring meeting.
Absolutely. The very first time we met, he said, "What schedule works for you?" Because he's in Europe, so 6 hour time
Yeah.
difference from the East Coast. So I said, "Well, let's we can start every other week if we need to. We can change the cadence of it based on what you want." I'm thinking, do we have Zoom back then? I don't think we had Zoom. I don't know what we
No.
had. Probably some other
Yeah.
archaic. But we connected face to face, so maybe it was Skype. It was something. But we would actually talk face to face, so it wasn't via phone or something like that. And we finally did get to meet at a conference. And he didn't know how tall or short I was, and I didn't know he was about 6'5". I had no idea. And he was waving at me, and I'm like, who is that tall person that's waving at me? And I said, oh, it's the gentleman on Skype that looks small. I get it now. So that was my first foray into don't look at people and think how tall or short they are based on a picture. He is great though. I know his partner really well. She's in regulatory
Oh, wow.
affairs as well. So yeah, but I've mentored many folks. I also volunteach. I call it volunteaching. I've spent the last 5 years. It started with Johns Hopkins Medical School, and it's grown to other schools like University of Chicago Medical School, Vanderbilt, and I teach doctorate and postdoctorate students that are bench researchers who want to enter industry. So I do a 2-day regulatory affairs 101 course for them,
Oh,
sometimes
wow.
on site. During COVID, it was remote. Hopefully, we'll go back to on site again. And it's great. I help connect them with others in the industry. Some of them, especially in the Johns Hopkins program, want to work at FDA because they're in the area. And a lot of them did end up there. So I hope that I helped shape some of those lives. I've probably spoken to at least or done this program for at least 1,000 people. Some of them I maintain mentorship with. Of course, I couldn't do that for everybody or I wouldn't have a job.
Wouldn't have enough
But
hours in the day.
no, there would I would be mentoring full time, and I love doing it. I don't want to do it full time, but it's also great because many times those folks, and we talked a little bit about this before we started recording, but a lot of people say I have passion for regulatory, and I say, do you even know what it is? Like you're looking at a book knowledge. Do you really understand what it is? How can you have passion for something you've never done? And often I'll suggest to them, you don't have to go directly to regulatory. You can go to a function that is tangential to it. There's many that are tangential. You can go to clinical development. You can go to bench research. Once you get into a company and they understand your loyalty and, your work ethic in that company, then try to move into a regulatory or do a shadowing or do a secondment if you can within that company in regulatory. Don't just think that you're going to go to regulatory and it's all going to be roses. It's I think many times people have a false idea of
Yeah.
really what it is. So I try to also bring, the last time we did it remotely, I brought 5 wonderful people, both from my company and other companies, to talk about their career journeys. And it was a zigzag career journey for sure. Somebody had a PhD in genetics from Harvard, and they did commercial, they did, they did clinical development, they did medical writing, they did many different things before they got to where they wanted to be, but they learned along the way. And it was about your journey, how you learn along the way and you repurpose skills. So a lot of what we talk about is also repurposing skills. Many of them will say, I suggest a lot of them might want to try medical writing because it does involve working very closely with regulatory. And medical writing, most of medical writers that I know are PhDs with
Yeah.
science backgrounds. It's a great thing to get into and then get into regulatory eventually if you like what you hear, because you'll be very closely connected with may even be in a regulatory group in some companies. So to try that out, a lot of them have gone to medical writing.
Yeah.
So
It's a
I,
great
yeah,
step, isn't it? It's a really great step because I think
it is.
we all know how difficult it can be to break into regulatory affairs as a profession. It's not easy, but that advice of trying other areas, getting in with a company who can support your growth, and sometimes it's not even about working with the right company, it's about working with the right leadership who recognize what you're really good at so they can help you to explore those future opportunities. I think that's really, really important for us to share. One thing I wanted us to go back to talk about for you personally, Linda, your experience in the industry has involved a lot of acquisitions along the way. Obviously, most recently, you've been part of a very large acquisition with the Seagen and the Pfizer
Mhm.
teams. Wanted to maybe understand some more about your learnings from being part of so many acquisitions.
And I've been on both sides. So I've been on the acquiring side and the acquired,
Yeah.
both sides. So Block Drug was the first time I was acquired. You were acquired. It was a small family-owned company. The family came in every day, so you knew the blocks. They sat on the top floor in a very nice executive area, and they were purchased by GSK. And it was the first time I was going to work for a big company, and I didn't at the time. Glaxo and SmithKline were merging. Well, Glaxo Wellcome was merging with SmithKline
Yes.
Beecham. So there was a lot of things going on at the same time. I supported the prescription drug side. GSK bought us for the consumer health side. So I actually was tasked with trying to sell off our products to another company, which we did. We sold them to
Oh,
Schwartz
wow.
Pharma. Schwartz Pharma, UCB got them from Schwartz Pharma. No, Schwartz Pharma, it went to Schwartz Pharma, and then it went to, I think, Mylan. It went to Meta. It was like this, and some of my name is still in some of those
Wow.
pieces of paper. And I've gotten calls like 5 acquisitions down the line asking me a question out of the blue. And it's so long ago. I have no idea what I did back then. I can't remember 20 years ago. But be careful what you put on a piece of paper and sign your name to, because somebody could come and find you down the road. But it was like submissions that we had done and things like that. People would ask me about. But that was the first acquisition, and it was they got treated extremely well. decided I didn't want to stay in consumer healthcare. I was on the prescription end, so it wasn't really going to be a good role for me. So, they gave me severance, which was the opportunity to look for something new. I ended up at another company for a couple of years doing business development and regulatory with consumer healthcare in licensing switch candidates, which was a little bit different. It gave me some business
True.
acumen, which I sorely needed. Um, and then from there, I went to Sanofi and I stayed there for 14 years. Got a lot of opportunities at Sanofi. Um, Sanofi had just acquired Aventis. I'm not sure acquisition is the right word. If it was a merger, it wasn't pretty.
Oh,
I'll just
wow.
say that. It wasn't a pretty time. It was two very large companies coming together, and Aventis had, legacy Aventis goes back to Rome Prolongor. If I could go back and back and back, and I met people there that had been through eight
Oh,
acquisitions.
wow. Goodness me.
Eight acquisitions, and they were still there. And I would say to them, "What did you learn?" And they said, "Well, the first thing is when you're being acquired, keep your head above. First of all, you have a job to do till the acquisition closes. Those acquisitions take months and months, maybe years. So you still have a job to do, and keep yourself focused." What I told my team when we found out we were being acquired, and it was public, I said, "This is a time for you to make sure that your CV, your LinkedIn profile, and your internal profile at work all match. It reflects actually what you do. And if you're interested in doing something else, maybe have a discussion with someone who's doing that now and how they got there. So maybe you can start thinking about that." The opportunities we have going from Seagen at 3,500 people to 80,000 plus people at Pfizer are immense. And it's a fantastic company. So, take this time to really think about, because, all of us we put down development goals, and they're short term, medium term, and long term. If you have a long term goal to be seconded to another country, or you have a long term goal to do something completely different, put that down. It doesn't hurt. So I really made people think about, what do you really want to do? Short term, I understand you want to keep the lights on, but long term, short and medium term, how do you want to get there? So we had a lot of great career discussions during that. And I did this for my folks in other companies. When I was at Sanofi, we purchased Chatham. I did the due diligence to help buy that. That was a consumer healthcare company. We bought Genzyme. I helped with, and that was a huge acquisition. I worked on that. So I've been through a lot of these on both the buying and the selling end. But I think the transparency of that is important. Seeing that there's opportunities in the newly formed organization is important. Keeping yourself, but there's still a job to do. There's still patients out there. We have to keep our head down. We had multiple approvals during this time. We didn't stop working and say, "Oh, woe is me, I'm waiting for this acquisition to happen." Life
Yeah.
went on. Of course, again, it was a very transparent. Everybody was very kind to us. Um, you know, I can't say enough good things about this recent acquisition. Really, I was very happily, and I made everybody know that will work for me, and even other people that have never been through this. So you have a lot of early careerists who really don't know what this means because they've never been anywhere else. So you try to explain to them change management. Everybody talks about who moved my
Yeah.
cheese, right? So I think it's important to explain, not to really shove it down their throats, really, but to really explain that change is good. Sometimes you get stale in what you're doing. This is an opportunity, perhaps, to keep doing what you're doing or do something else. This is you're early in your career. You have so much more ahead of you. Please don't focus on the negative. Please focus on
Yeah.
the positive. And I've been doing that since the announcement. Um,
Yeah. And again,
so
this is a mindset, isn't it? It's being having a
yeah,
positive outlook and feeling positive, looking towards the future. As we've said before, acquisition is always a scary term, but it's part and parcel of our industry and the way it works and the way that we bring better medicines to patients quicker. It's part and parcel of our environment that we work in. So your advice, I think, for those going through acquisitions is going to be really valued. I think positive mindset, looking at the opportunity, as you said, maybe this could now be a chance to try living in another country. So relocation where maybe you couldn't do that before, or looking at another team. I think that's really great advice. And I think for you personally as well, Linda, it's been a real big learning curve, hasn't it, to help you be able to support these businesses through such big acquisitions?
It is. You learn a lot of business acumen, which is not something you're taught necessarily. It's kind of like on
Yeah,
the job training. So business, to be a leader, you do have to have business acumen. You have to know how to do budgets. You have to be able to track your budget, make sure you stay in the budget. You've got to have talent acquisition skills. You have to understand when you interview someone if they'd be a good fit culturally within your company. So there's a lot of learnings, and of course you get training at each company you go to. And the trainings I went to, at GSK were different than the trainings at Sanofi, which were different than the trainings at Seagen or Seattle Genetics. So those trainings were all different because the cultures were different. Um, but I think this company that I went to, the Seattle Genetics at the time, now Seagen, now Pfizer, it was 1,200 people when I
yeah,
started. I thought it was teeny compared to where I'd been at 110,000 people, person company. I thought it was so teeny. It really wasn't teeny. It was medium sized, but to me it was like, whoa, this is fantastic. I know everybody. I think that was the big thing. You can just about meet everybody and know who they are.
yeah.
So
And obviously, when you're working in a big pharma environment, it's totally different culturally to working in a small biotech. I'm curious actually to hear some advice from you on this, Linda. What would you say has been some of the biggest learnings for you in terms of the difference between the big pharma culture and the small biotech?
well, at the bigger companies, you're a number. It's just the way it is. Even if you have a great manager, there's many layers. So maybe you're not heard or seen as you think you
Hmm.
should be. That's the first thing. But in a big company, you get to learn a
Very
lot.
true.
Um, you get to learn a lot. But you also get to learn a lot if you're the N of one in a small company. But maybe in a scary way, you get to learn a lot, maybe trial and error. Whereas in a big company, going from a larger company to a smaller company, I was able to take the learnings of putting a whole new team together for a whole new function that they never had before. But I had those learnings from a big company, so it was pretty easy for me. But if I'd never had that, I don't know how I would have done it. Well, it would have been trial and error. It wouldn't have been as
Yeah,
smooth as it was. Um, so, there's a lot of positives and a lot of negatives. If you go to a small company, you may be wearing multiple hats. If you go to a bigger company, it's going to be a much more, I think, focused role that you'll get. So I think some people cannot handle having multiple hats at one time. Sometimes they're not good at project
yeah,
management or time management. And having that focused role in a bigger company works for them better. But I worked for big companies almost all my life and then went to I'll call it a smaller company. And it was a great kind of way to kind of segue my career. For me, it was great. It
yeah.
was fantastic.
That's great to hear. And I'm pleased that it's worked for you. I think that balance of trying both smaller organizations and large organizations is the key to learning as much and also figuring out what's right for you. Because as you said, you might love wearing multiple hats, you might love spinning different plates all at once, or you might love working on one project in more detail, perhaps. I think it's always good to learn what you're good at and where your strengths are. So yeah, it's a very important point to cover. Wanted to finish up today and maybe hear a little bit from you about what you're thinking for the future now, because I know you're obviously in this new role where you've helped through the whole of the Seagen and the Pfizer acquisition. For you now at this point in your
Mhm.
career, Linda, what do you see yourself doing?
What do I see myself doing? And well, and I can't see myself ever retiring. When I've told people I'm thinking of retiring, they start laughing. Because I do so much volunteer work. And so I do teach. I have been teaching in a regulatory master's degree program for over
Wow.
25 years, and I'm still doing that. I do it on the weekends because it's the only free time I have. So I teach on Sundays from 9 to 3:30. So if any of you want to go to my Reg and Tell
Yeah.
class, please do. I've been thinking about teaching a few more classes. So I will be probably most likely leaving industry this coming year. So that's the first thing. That doesn't mean that I am retiring. I'll call it semi-retiring. I still want to teach. I still want to volunteer. I still want to educate. I still want to mentor. I think it's so important. I want to make sure that the regulatory professional of tomorrow, I can kind of help shape them. I think that would be fantastic. And I've seen it in the past for the people that worked for me. I just can't, it's hard for me to think of not getting up in the morning at 6 a.m. and start working. So I think that's going to take a little bit of time for me to, I'm probably going to do it for about a year. Just get up and start reading, because that's what I do in the morning. For the first 3 or 4 hours, I read and I analyze what's come in from the regulatory environment changes over time. So I do that in the morning. So I probably will do that for a while until maybe I sleep in. I don't sleep a lot, by the way. I sleep very little. I sleep about 4 hours
Oh,
a
wow, bless
night.
you.
Um, so for some reason, I really don't need a lot of sleep. That is a very bad habit that I got from my father. So I started, he would get up early and go to bed late. So at 4 years old, I used to
Yeah.
do the same thing. And unfortunately, that really has not changed.
Oh,
In over 60 years, I'm still doing the same thing. So hopefully I can learn to do that. But regulatory has been
yeah,
so great to me as a profession. I want to make sure that I can keep doing it as long as I can. I'm still chairing conferences this year, co-chairing a conference. I'll be speaking at a strategy conference. I'll be speaking at RAPS
perfect.
Convergence in Long Beach, California. I might be speaking at DIA in June. So I'm still out there. I still want to share my expertise with people.
And
So,
thank you.
but thank you again for inviting me. This has been a great for me to think about
Yeah.
my career
I
journey and
was
what
going to
I've
say
done. So
thank you for
thank you.
sharing your career
Thank you.
journey, because I think it's inspirational, not just for those who want to enter regulatory or even want to enter our industry, right? But also for those who are in leadership positions in their career, who maybe want to understand a little bit more about the mindset and some of the challenges that others have faced. So thank you for being so open with us about your journey. We really look forward to sharing this with our audience. I'm sure Linda would be more than happy to connect with anybody who's listening to us today. She's clearly got a wealth of knowledge and advice that she can share as well. So thank you ever so much for joining us today, Linda.
Thank you. And I'll say, if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn, please do. But please put a note in there that you listen to the Lift Up podcast, so we know where you are, and please let me know what you thought about the
Absolutely.
podcast.
Well,
So,
thank you again, Linda, for your time. We
yeah.
really appreciate you joining us today. It's been really great to hear your story. So thank you.